New York City in winter is unlike anywhere else. The vast streets crowded with people rushing to their destinations are always alive with an energy that refuses to yield to the biting cold of winter. However, in the stillness of the late night, when the streetlights cast faint glows on the snow-drenched sidewalks, the city's quiet becomes profound, like a whisper from a world fast asleep. And beneath the dim light, a sound lingers, soft yet full of sorrow, the sound of a violin. The instrument, as if carrying untold sadness, soaks into the cold air of the city. The music isn't joyful or peaceful. It's a melancholic tune, yet it holds warmth like an invitation in the dark. David is a homeless man, no longer young, but not exactly old. He's around 60, a frail man with silver hair, and no one knows how many years he has lived under this streetlight. Perhaps life has shown him enough pain, enough upheaval for him to be resigned to his fate. He no longer dreams or hopes much for the future. Each day passes in a blur of repetition, dullness, and loneliness. Once a talented musician, David had everything people could wish for in life: fame, a career, and a happy family. But an unforeseen accident took it all away. His wife died in a tragic car accident, and his only daughter left when she was too young, never to return. Since then, he lost his faith in life and in humanity. The passionate music he once played is now nothing but sad, echoing melodies in his heart. David still sits every night beneath the streetlights, his old violin in hand, singing songs that only he understands. His sounds may not be loud enough to attract attention, but they are deep enough to stir a soul adrift. Then there is Lily, a 23-year-old girl who looks like a ghost amidst the bustling crowd. Her long hair is usually tied neatly, but in recent days she no longer takes care of herself as she once did. Her coat is worn out, her eyes tired, and her shoulders slightly hunched as if carrying an invisible burden. Her office job has left Lily feeling numb. She no longer has passion or enthusiasm. Each morning she wakes up, she drifts through another colorless day, devoid of joy or passion. She doesn't know exactly when this feeling began, this sensation of living without truly being alive. Everything seems dull. The words of encouragement from her family, the conversations with her friends, none of it is enough to break her deep sense of loneliness. Her heart feels frozen, unable to sense the warmth of the world around her. She no longer sees meaning in life. The calls from her mother no longer bring her joy, and messages from her friends fail to ignite any spark of excitement. Lily feels as though she is imprisoned in her own body and mind. One night, when she could no longer sleep, Lily decided to take a walk, hoping to find a little peace in the cold air of the city. She stepped out of her small rented room, walking aimlessly, seeking to escape the unending thoughts swirling in her head. Then, as if by some strange force, the sound of a violin echoed through the streets, calling her closer. Her steps didn't falter when she heard the sound. She had walked a long distance only to find a quiet place for her soul. But this music pulled her back. It was a melody unclear, as though it were an unfinished piece, but one filled with emotion. Those smooth notes seemed to sink deep into her heart, as if they were her own sorrow, the things she couldn't express. Lily didn't know why she stopped, nor why she sat down on the bench nearby under the dim streetlight. But one thing was certain: the music had reached a deep place in her, a place she never knew existed. The emotions she had long hidden began to surface, impossible to hold back. The streetlight illuminated David's face, a man all too familiar with loneliness. From his eyes, Lily saw something she recognized: sadness that she too carried within her. But instead of avoiding it, he confronted it through his music. His music, though not words, held a healing power that words could never replace. Though David and Lily had never met before in that moment, they shared something intangible, a peculiar connection only music could create. And though Lily didn't realize it, that very music would be the bridge that would take her from darkness into light, from pain into healing. The streets continued bustling, but under the streetlight only the sound of the violin remained as the two sat quietly immersed in their own world. Beneath the faint glow where loneliness and music harmonized, a journey of friendship and healing began. Lily didn't know how long she had been sitting under the dim streetlight, but perhaps the whole world outside no longer existed. David's music had strangely captivated her, making it impossible for her to leave. Each note seemed like a gentle breath full of sadness, yet brimming with life. She no longer felt the cold of the winter creeping into her body, nor did she hear the sounds of traffic outside. All that remained was the music, the melodies flowing through her mind, soothing the wounds she had never dared face. Lily turned to look at David. He sat silently, his gaze distant as if lost in his own world. His bony fingers gently glided across the violin strings, each note seemingly distilled from the deep thoughts and sorrow he had carried through his silent years on the streets. Lily wondered, could he feel what she was going through? Could his music soothe the pain she had always tried to hide? She couldn't leave. It wasn't out of curiosity, but because of a strange feeling, as if this music was speaking the words she couldn't utter. She didn't know if it was coincidence, but when the melody ended, the space suddenly became eerily quiet. David stopped playing, and only the sound of the cold wind blowing through the trees remained sweeping across the empty streets. David didn't turn to look at Lily. He sat there, his eyes closed, not from exhaustion, but because he understood that the music had said everything. The songs he played weren't just meaningless notes. They were untold stories, emotions he couldn't express in words. And if anyone wanted to listen, he would show them a part of his heart. Lily sat silently, unsure of what to say. She didn't want to break the stillness of that moment. But her heart, drawn along by the rhythm, began to speak. Unable to hold it back any longer, she gently asked, "Sir, you play so beautifully. I've never heard music like that. How long have you been playing the violin?" David slowly opened his eyes. He wasn't surprised by her words, as he had sensed her presence in the past few nights. However, he wasn't used to opening up to others, not used to sharing about himself. But the music had helped him do so. "Thank you," he replied, his voice raspy, as if time and pain had drained him. "I've played for quite a while, but not to earn money, only to survive. Music is the only thing that makes me feel alive." Lily sat still, unsure how to respond. She could feel the loneliness in his voice, a loneliness she seemed to be familiar with. She didn't know how to help him, but one thing was certain: this music, what he had just played, had touched her heart. "So, aren't you afraid of loneliness?" Lily couldn't hold back the question, feeling as though all the questions she had stored in her heart had finally found a way out. David didn't answer immediately. He lowered his head and looked at his violin as if considering an answer. After a brief silence, he softly spoke. "Young lady, I've learned to live with it. Loneliness is a part of my life. And sometimes it helps me see things that can't be seen with the eyes. Music helps me face it rather than avoid it." Lily felt a pang in her heart. She knew she was living in loneliness, but she had never realized that she could live with it. She had always run from it, trying to keep herself busy to avoid confronting the thoughts in her mind. But now, looking into David's experienced eyes, she realized that perhaps the best way to overcome loneliness wasn't to run away from it, but to accept it and learn to live with it. For reasons she couldn't explain, Lily decided she would come back here every night. She couldn't quite explain why she felt this way, but every time David's violin played, she felt a strange connection. She wanted to hear more, to learn more about him, about the music, and maybe about herself. The next day, Lily went to work with a different mood. Thoughts about the meeting the night before wouldn't leave her mind. She felt as if something had changed within her. Whenever she felt lost, David's music echoed in her head, like a reminder that perhaps not everything in life was loneliness, and that deep emotions could be expressed in ways she had never imagined. She didn't know how she would meet David again, but one thing was for sure from that moment. His music would be the light that guided her, helping her rediscover the joy of life she had lost long ago. That night, Lily returned to the same street. Beneath the dim streetlight, she saw David's silhouette sitting there, his violin still in hand like an inseparable part of his life. She didn't know what would happen, but her heart was ready to open its doors to whatever this music would bring. She walked closer, and this time she no longer felt afraid. She sat down beside him, no words needed. Tonight the violin would continue to play, and a new journey would begin, not just between David and Lily, but within her own soul. David looked at Lily sitting beside him, saying nothing. But in his eyes was a quiet understanding, as if he knew what would happen next. He continued to gently caress the violin strings with his bony fingers, the music flowing again soft and smooth like the breeze in the dark night. This time his music wasn't just old melodies. It was an invitation, a welcoming. Lily sat there listening. The sense of time seemed to blur, losing its meaning. The sadness in her heart seemed to be soothed with each note. She no longer felt lost. Something magical was happening in this space, and she didn't want to leave. The piece David played today was different. Unlike the previous nights when the music flowed like a stream today, each note seemed deeper, clearer, and more filled with emotion. Lily realized that he wasn't playing for some external reason. He was playing for himself, for the emotions he couldn't express with words. "Sir, don't you ever feel tired?" Lily suddenly asked a question she hadn't planned to ask. But the words just came out as if they were a compulsion she couldn't resist. She felt a special connection between her and him. Though they were complete strangers, the music had created an invisible thread binding their hearts. David paused briefly, turning to her. His eyes were deep, filled with contemplation, sorrow, and dreams that had been extinguished. A gentle smile tinged with nostalgia appeared on his lips. "Tired," David said softly, his lips moving as if searching for words to express something complicated. "Yes, of course I am. But being tired isn't the worst thing. The worst thing is having no reason to continue, nothing to long for." Lily fell silent, his words like invisible thorns piercing her soul. Those words seemed to awaken a part of her, a part she had locked away, a part she was afraid to face. She looked up at his face, into his eyes, and she saw a resilience she had never seen in anyone else. Even though his life had lost all that he once had, he could still go on, still hold the violin, and still bring forth sounds that soothed others. Lily felt the loneliness in her heart, a loneliness she had tried to hide for so long. Now she understood why she was sitting here, why this music had such a pull on her. She wasn't the only one lonely in this world. David, this man, was too. But he chose not to run from it. He faced it through his music, and that music had helped him survive. "Have you ever thought about ending it all?" Lily asked again, her voice trembling. She didn't know if she had the right to ask him this, but the question had been weighing heavily on her heart for a long time. David stopped playing, his gaze resting on the violin as if he was reflecting on the question. A long silence passed, but then he spoke, his voice low and deep. "Girl, I've thought about it many times. But every time I stop playing, I feel something, a push from within. It doesn't let me give up. And music always gives me a reason to live." Lily didn't know how to respond. His words were a gentle shock, making her shudder. Each word, each sentence seemed to stir emotions in her she hadn't dared to admit. She too had felt so weary, she wanted to give up everything. But looking into David's eyes, she realized that life isn't always easy. But if we have a reason to live, we'll find a way to keep going. His music had shown her that, and now she wondered if David's music was also helping him find a reason to continue. A few minutes passed in silence. Lily looked up at David, and for the first time in a long while, she felt as if she had found a part of herself. Not complete joy, not ecstasy, but acceptance. Accepting the pain, the wounds in her heart, and learning to live with them. She no longer felt like the only lonely person. She no longer felt like she had to fight alone. "Could you teach me to play the violin?" Lily asked gently, her voice full of desire. David looked at her for a long while, as if thinking about the question. Perhaps he hadn't expected a girl like Lily to want to learn from him, a homeless man living on the fringes of society. But then he realized that this wasn't a question about learning music. It was a question about salvation, about learning to live again. "All right," he replied, his eyes oddly gleaming. "If you want to learn, I'll teach you." And so, beneath the dim streetlights, a fateful meeting began. Not a meeting between a homeless man and a young girl, but a meeting of two souls, searching for something they had lost, a reason to live, a reason to continue. And the sound of the violin, whether sad or joyful, would be the rhythm that guided them through the difficult days ahead. Lily never imagined her life would change so much after just one night. But she had decided she would stay. And not just stay in the moment, but continue to walk with David on the path of music, rediscovering the joy of life, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. After that night, Lily returned to the small street with a strange feeling. She wasn't sure what she was searching for. But one thing was certain: David's presence, his violin, and those quiet nights under the streetlight had become an inseparable part of her life. Every evening after finishing her dull office work, Lily would find her way to this street, as if escaping the pain in her heart and trying to find something in the cold city breeze that she had lost long ago. David still sat there every night like a silent teacher, his eyes never leaving his violin. He seemed to have become a part of these streets, just as the streetlight had become ingrained in his life. Whenever Lily came, he would gently nod in greeting, and then continue playing, as if no words were necessary, for the music had already said everything. In the first few nights, Lily would sit quietly beside him, listening to the violin, feeling a change within her soul. She wasn't in a hurry to learn anything, nor to speak. Simply being there under the streetlight, she felt peace. Her worries, thoughts about work, family, and the past, all faded as she immersed herself in David's music. Each night she sat longer sometimes, forgetting how much time had passed. David noticed the change in her. She was no longer as silent as before. Sometimes when the music stopped, she would look at him and smile softly, a smile of understanding. She didn't need to say much. Just a look, just her presence was enough. And perhaps he didn't need to explain why he sat there every night playing under the streetlight. His music had already spoken for him. A week later, Lily decided to take another step. She brought an old violin, one she had found in the attic of her house. A violin she had once learned to play as a child, but had abandoned due to the busyness of life. David looked at her with a gentle gaze, not surprised, but with a hint of encouragement. He said nothing, only silently took his violin and began to play a simple melody. Then looked at Lily. "Follow me," he said, his voice deep and steady. Lily carefully took her violin, placing the bow on the strings, but her fingers were unsure. It had been a long time since she played, and the first sound that came from her old violin was rough, lacking harmony. But David didn't rush her. He simply watched and waited. "Don't worry about the sound. Don't try to make it perfect. Just feel each note," he said, his eyes calm but full of patience. "The violin is a part of you. It's not just an instrument. It's how you share your emotions." Lily followed his advice. She no longer focused on whether she was playing right or wrong. She simply felt the vibrations from her fingers moving across the strings. The raw sounds, though imperfect, held a strange honesty. a part of her began to open. She could feel the gentleness in each note, as if the music was flowing into her body, softening the broken pieces of her soul. Every night Lily returned, and her violin had become an inseparable part of her life. The lessons no longer felt tense as they did at first. She began to find joy in each melody, in every stroke of the bow. Although her music was still awkward, David never scolded her. He simply smiled and nodded gently when she played a note right. Gradually, Lily felt a deeper connection, not just with the music, but with David. Every evening there was not only the music, but also unspoken stories. She began to share with him the difficult days of her life, the feeling of being lost in the world around her, the emotions she couldn't speak to anyone else. David listened, his eyes always the same, silent and understanding. He didn't need to offer comforting words, nor did he need to give advice. His presence, along with the music from his violin, was enough. On some nights, Lily would look up and see a patient understanding in his eyes, as if he knew that with each step, each note she played, she was getting closer to finding herself. For David, these evenings were not just about sharing music. He had started to see a change in Lily. Each night she grew closer to the music, closer to herself. He didn't need to say much, but he could see the movement in her, a strong transformation he had once gone through himself. One night during a cold evening, Lily played a piece she had just learned. When she finished, she looked up at David, and this time it wasn't just a soft smile. She truly smiled, a bright smile, as if the sun had just risen after a dark night. It was a moment they both felt, though neither said anything. The music had brought her a piece of joy she had lost. David looked at her, his gaze softer than usual. He could never forget the feeling of finding a reason to live through music. And now he saw that in Lily. The change in her, her recovery, felt like a part of him was being revived. The evenings under the streetlight became an irreplaceable habit in their lives. For Lily, they were no longer just lessons. They were moments of rebirth. She wasn't just learning to play the violin. She was learning to face her pain, learning to find joy in simple things again. And for David, these nights weren't just quiet hours. They were a way to share the remainder of himself with someone else, a way to not be lonely anymore. The notes continued to play under the dim streetlight in the cold of winter. But in their hearts, a strange warmth began to bloom. Under that light, music was not just healing. It was connection, a bridge between two souls, finding themselves both in music and in life. As time passed, Lily began to see noticeable changes in herself. She no longer felt like a ghost hiding in the long, dark nights. She no longer feared confronting the pains of the past. She no longer felt lost. David's music and his companionship had brought her miracles she had never imagined. She no longer needed to search for a reason to live. She had found it right there in the melodies of the old violin, beneath the dim streetlight. With each passing night, Lily felt the transformation within herself. The evenings under the streetlight were no longer just meetings between her and David. They had become a part of her life, a sacred moment she could not do without. She no longer felt lonely in the quiet of the late night, and that changed the way she saw the world. Music through David's fingers was no longer just melodies or rhythms. It was a healing remedy, the key to unlocking her heart to the emotions she had long locked away. She began to realize that each time she closed her eyes and let the music guide her, everything around her faded. All that remained was the deep connection between her and those notes, a connection that didn't require words or explanation. Last night, when David's violin played, Lily couldn't hold back her emotions. She closed the door not only because of the quiet atmosphere, but also because of the change she felt deep inside her. She felt like a part of the music, as if the violin wasn't just an instrument, but a part of her soul. A part she had lost, a part she had been avoiding for so long. David, though not one for many words, had shown Lily deep understanding through his eyes. Their silent evenings were unforgettable. He didn't ask much about her past, nor did he push her to share painful things. He simply listened in his own way, with understanding eyes and music as his only answer. As time passed, Lily slowly learned to slow down, to feel each moment, not rushing, not avoiding. She no longer feared confronting the thoughts about the past, the loss, the pain she had endured. David's music helped her realize that not all pain is something to be avoided. Sometimes we need to face it, feel it, and from there learn how to move on. One night during a lesson under the light, Lily carefully placed the bow on the strings, trying to keep the rhythm. This piece was not easy, but she wanted to challenge herself. Her fingers weren't yet nimble, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that she no longer felt like a failure, no longer afraid of the imperfections in her sound. She played the incomplete notes, but she no longer worried about mistakes. David looked at her, his eyes shining strangely. He didn't say anything, but a gentle smile appeared on his face. His gaze seemed like a silent encouragement. Lily stopped playing her breath faster, but she looked into his eyes and saw complete acceptance. No one expected her to be perfect. No one demanded that. All she needed was to keep going, keep playing, keep living. "Thank you," Lily said, her voice choking in her throat. This was the first time she felt this gratitude so sincerely. This thank you wasn't just for learning the violin, but for the patience, the empathy that David had given her. He wasn't just a teacher. He was a friend, someone who understood her better than anyone else. David didn't answer immediately, but he nodded gently, as if he understood exactly what she wanted to say. Music had helped them connect in a miraculous way, without needing words. Both of them, in those quiet nights under the streetlight, shared a common language, the language of music and understanding. She began to realize that the pain she had suppressed for so long wasn't a bad thing. In fact, it was part of her, an inseparable part of her growth. David had shown her that in those dark, lonely nights, music wasn't just sound. It was the torch that lit the way for her. A month passed, and Lily could now play a few basic pieces, and more than that, she could feel herself through each note. Every night when the violin was raised, her heart seemed to beat in sync with the melody, gently and steadily. She no longer felt lonely in the music. She no longer felt like an outsider. She found peace in the music, and this miraculously helped her find herself. On a spring night, when the first rays of dawn began to break through the dark sky, Lily stood next to David, her violin in hand. This time she didn't play alone. She and he played a piece together, a piece she had learned over the past months. At first her fingers trembled, but gradually her playing blended with David's, creating a complete melody. She never thought one day she would be able to play a complete piece, but today, under the early morning light, she realized that not only the music, but she herself had become complete. She no longer feared, no longer felt like she was incomplete. She had found joy in making music, in sharing emotions, in opening up to others. For David, those long nights under the streetlight were no longer lonely evenings. He had found a friend in Lily, someone who had helped him rediscover the meaning of music, of life. Every time he watched Lily play, he saw not only her progress, but also himself in her. His years of loneliness seemed to have been healed through music, and now he saw a new light in his life, Lily. The nights under the streetlight continued. The violin still played, but now the music was no longer just healing for one person. It had become a bridge between two hearts, between a man who had lost everything and a woman who was finding herself. They didn't just share music. They shared life, resilience, and hope. And those nights, whether rainy or sunny, no matter how cold, were always a place where they found peace, healing, and the joy of living. Spring arrived in New York City gently, But the change in Lily's heart was powerful and clear. The days she spent under the streetlight learning to play the violin and conversing with David had gradually become treasured memories. This time wasn't just about learning music. It was also a journey of rediscovering herself. The loneliness Lily had carried for so long was gradually replaced by a newfound joy, one she never imagined she would find again. The violin, a teacher, a friend in the darkness, had helped Lily realize that life doesn't always have to follow what others expect. She didn't need to be perfect, nor did she need to always be happy or successful. What mattered was finding sincerity in the small moments, like sitting beside David playing music together and listening to the melodies that soothed the soul. Every night she returned to the violin, each night, making a little progress. The pieces she played gradually became smoother. The notes no longer awkward as they once were. She wasn't just learning to play the violin, but also learning how to live more fully with her emotions. Sometimes in moments of silence between songs, she felt a light sadness. But now she no longer feared facing that emotion. Emotions, whether sad or happy, were a part of life. One evening, when the spring breeze carried a light chill, Lily arrived earlier than usual. She wanted to play a piece she had practiced over the past week, and this time she didn't just want to play to learn, but also to share with David. She no longer focused on making everything perfect. This time she simply wanted to express her feelings through music. David was there as usual, sitting with his violin, his gaze distant. He didn't ask Lily what she was doing. He simply looked at her as if telling her to just go ahead. Lily picked up the violin, carefully placed the bow on the strings, and the first notes began to play. The sound wasn't perfect, but it was full of emotion. She played not to please anyone, but to express what she was feeling. When the piece ended, she stopped, afraid to look at David. She feared that he would notice the clumsiness in her playing. But then she felt a softness from him. David smiled, not saying much, just gently nodding. "Well done, Lily," he said, his voice still warm as always. "You've made a lot of progress." Lily felt a wave of relief. She didn't need praise, but his eyes, his understanding spoke volumes. David never expected her to be perfect. He just wanted her to be true to herself and keep moving forward. From then on, the evenings with David became journeys not only about music, but also about rediscovering what she had lost. Stories of the past, of forgotten dreams began to unfold. Lily wasn't just learning to play the violin. She was learning to face herself, her pain, and most importantly, she was learning how to let go of the past. One time when Lily's violin produced an unsatisfactory sound, she stopped, let the violin drop from her hands, and burst into tears. Not because she had failed, but because she realized her own patience, her acceptance that not everything was easy, and that this was the true path to finding real joy in life. David wasn't in a rush. He simply looked at her and said something Lily would never forget. "Don't be afraid when you can't make everything perfect, though. It's in those moments that we find our true selves." Music is the same. It's not always perfect, but the sincerity in the music will touch the hearts of those who listen. Lily began to find the peaceful moments in life that she had once overlooked. She started walking in the park early in the mornings, watching the breeze ripple across the lake. She realized that simple things, moments like these, were the most precious. She had always sought grand goals, wanting a better job, a perfect life. But now she understood that happiness wasn't something to achieve. It was something to feel every day. She also began reconnecting with old friends, people she had distanced herself from because of her loneliness. The conversations were no longer heavy, no longer pressured. She laughed more, lived more authentically. And when sitting with her friends, Lily realized that she no longer felt emotionally deprived. She had rebuilt her relationships, starting with herself. One evening, after a stressful week at work, Lily went to see David as usual. Today she felt truly light, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. David was still sitting there under the light, his eyes perceptive but full of patience. "David, I feel different now," Lily said, her eyes bright with a satisfaction she had never felt before. David didn't answer immediately. He simply looked at her with a gentle smile. "You've done well, Lily. But the most important thing is that you understand that the change within yourself is what matters most." Lily felt the understanding in his eyes. She no longer felt like a broken piece in this vast world. She felt she was a part of life, imperfect, but a meaningful part. "Thank you," Lily said softly, filled with gratitude. "Thank you for helping me find myself again." David didn't say anything more. He just picked up his violin and played a new piece. It wasn't a complicated piece, but it was full of emotion. The music wasn't just for Lily. It was a gift from David to her, a gift of friendship and shared understanding that they had built together during the long nights under the streetlight. Time continued to pass, and the evenings under the streetlight were no longer simple violin lessons. They had become evenings of connection, of a special friendship. Both Lily and David realized that in life, nothing was more valuable than understanding and empathy between people. And sometimes all it takes is a violin, a quiet night, and a sincere friend to rediscover the joy of living. Their story, though simple, contained a deep message that in each person, whether young or old, there is a journey to rediscover themselves. And music, friendship, and empathy are the elements that help them overcome difficulties and find joy in life. Summer came slowly, but its light shone through the window each morning, making the city bright and full of life. Lily felt the change in herself, not just in the moments with the violin, but in how she viewed the world around her. The days with David had helped her realize that happiness was not a destination, but a journey. A journey where sometimes all it takes is a violin, a friend, and a little time to rediscover the joy of living that we have lost. Standing by the glass wall of her small room, watching the sunlight penetrate the air, Lily smiled. She had found a peace within herself that she never dared hope for before. Though nothing had changed drastically in her life, the change in how she felt and how she lived was a profound shift. She no longer felt bound by negative thoughts. She no longer felt like she was living a meaningless life. Every day, whether at work or in personal moments, she found the small but precious things. One evening, after a stressful day at work, Lily arrived earlier than usual. It seemed she couldn't wait to see David, not just for the music, but for the conversations, the shared moments that only here under the streetlight made her feel truly alive. David was still sitting in his usual spot, the violin in his hands. This time, the atmosphere between them was a little different. How long had it been since they didn't need to say anything? Their friendship had transcended words. David didn't ask Lily about work or the difficulties she faced in life. He simply looked at her, his eyes glowing warmly, like an old friend meeting again after a long time. Lily sat beside him as usual. Today she didn't bring her violin, but she didn't feel like something was missing. Music had become part of her life. Even without holding the violin, just listening was enough. She felt the warmth in the air, the serenity in her heart. David began to play a gentle, soothing melody, like the breeze gently entering the heart. Each note wasn't the awkwardness it had been when Lily first started, but a blend of sincere emotions and deep feelings. This music wasn't meant to please anyone. It was simply an expression of existence in this world. Lily sat silently, eyes closed, letting each note carry her into another space, a space where there were no worries or sorrows. She no longer had to worry about what she hadn't done or what wasn't perfect. These notes made her feel the peace in her heart, as if everything was okay, even if nothing was perfect. "You know, David, I never thought I would find joy in life again, Lily said, not as a thank you, but as a truth she had discovered over the past months. David stopped playing and turned to look at her. His eyes again shone with warmth, as if he had been waiting to hear this for a long time. Joy in life isn't something we find somewhere far away, Lily. It's always inside us in how we face life. Music is just a way to see that more clearly. Lily looked at him, and his words weren't just advice. They were the deep life experiences he had accumulated over the years. He didn't need to speak much because everything he had lived, everything he had gone through, was the answer. You know, I used to think I would never escape from my shell. I thought I would be stuck forever in loneliness and sadness. Lily said, her voice a little choked, but full of gratitude. But now, I understand that I can change. I can feel this life. David smiled gently and continued to play. The light yet profound music seemed to be the answer to everything Lily had just said. No need for many words, no need for explanations. Sometimes these sounds are the salvation, the energy that keeps people moving forward in life. Though they didn't say more, both sat in silence together. Lily no longer found silence uncomfortable. In fact, it was the time she felt closest to the world, to herself, and to David. Nights like this, no need for many words, just each other's presence was enough. Their friendship didn't need to be explained. Neither of them needed to fill the silence with words, but with music, with sharing from hearts that truly understood one another. A week later, Lily decided to participate in a small music performance for a charity organization. This was her first time playing the violin in front of others, but she didn't feel anxious. When she walked on stage, she remembered the lessons with David, the time she stumbled and stood up again, the time she thought she wasn't good enough for this. But now she no longer feared. She just wanted to play, to share her emotions through each note. And when she picked up the violin, the first notes didn't just sound like music. They were feelings, freedom, and the rediscovery of the joy of life that she had lost. She played naturally, without fear. The people around her didn't just hear music. They felt the sincerity and honesty in every melody. When the performance ended, Lily stood there filled with a sense of accomplishment, not because of the perfection of her performance, but because she had completed a long journey. She looked into the eyes of those around her, and she felt their warmth. They didn't just love the music. They felt the change in her. Lily didn't need to search for anything else. She had found joy in herself, in the freedom of living true to her emotions, in sincere friends, and in the music that David had helped her discover. When Lily returned under the streetlight one evening, David was still sitting there, the violin in his hands. This time she sat beside him, no longer afraid, no longer feeling lost. She was simply a part of this life, and music was the shining torch that guided her on every next step. "Thank you, David," Lily said. But this time it wasn't just a thank you for the music lessons. It was a thank you for friendship, for the patience, and for the understanding he had shown her. David didn't say anything, just smiled and continued to play. And so, under the streetlight, the music continued to play, a reminder that the joy of life can be found in the simplest things. One early autumn evening, when the crisp air had begun to infiltrate every corner of the city, an unexpected event occurred that seemed to disrupt everything. Lily received a surprising call from her company, notifying her of a major change. She was being laid off due to a restructuring of the department where she worked. She couldn't believe her ears when she heard the news. Although her job hadn't been a major source of motivation for her in recent times, being removed from a familiar environment made her feel a sense of loss. Deep inside, she felt a part of the old sense of helplessness creeping back in. Lily held the phone in her hand, feeling a coldness take over her, but she refused to let it consume her again. She had gone through job and life breakdowns before. But this time she felt she couldn't just let go as she had before. The music of David, his teachings, and the quiet evenings spent with the violin had helped her rebuild her confidence. But now, with everything she had worked for, potentially unraveling, she wasn't sure if she had the strength to face this challenge. Walking down the familiar street, a feeling of suffocation lingered within her. She felt like she was once again standing on the edge of despair. However, she knew clearly that if she didn't fight back against herself, she would fall into that spiral once again. When she arrived at the familiar place under the dim streetlight, she saw David sitting there in the same position as always, violin in hand, his deep eyes gazing into the distance. Nothing had changed, and this gave Lily a strange sense of comfort. She walked over, sat down beside him, and said nothing. Her emotions became tangled, and she couldn't find the words. David stopped playing and turned to look at her. His gaze wasn't filled with worry, but contained a profound understanding. He didn't need to ask what had happened. He knew that everyone has moments when they must face challenges that only they can overcome. "Do you feel like everything is falling apart, Lily?" David asked, his voice low but warm. Lily looked at him silent, just nodding slightly. She didn't know how to express her feelings, but perhaps she didn't need to. Just being here under this streetlight next to David, she felt that she wasn't alone. David looked into her eyes and said, "When we face an event, it may feel like everything is being lost. But in reality, it's an opportunity to rebuild everything from scratch. Like an unfinished piece of music, we can create new, stronger sounds." Lily listened to his words, and her heart began to lighten. She didn't know why she could find peace in such simple words, but they were like a small light in the dark night. She began to understand that instead of worrying about the things she couldn't change, she needed to focus on the opportunities this event presented. She had spent so much time mourning her losses. Now it was time to look ahead, to create new opportunities. In the following days, Lily began looking for new jobs, new opportunities she had never considered before. She started rewriting her goals and dreams, the things she had neglected before. Music continued to be the torch that guided her through the tough moments. Every evening after a long day at work, she would go to David, play the violin, and chat. Sometimes they didn't need to say anything, just sitting together, feeling the melodies was enough to bring her peace. Lily realized that not everything in life goes according to plan, but each change can be an opportunity to explore oneself. She no longer saw challenges as invisible walls, but as opportunities to grow, to experiment, and to create. A few months later, Lily found a new job, but this time she no longer felt the pressure to prove herself to others. She found joy in her work, not just because it was a stable job, but because it aligned with what she truly loved. She had decided to let go of the expectations from the outside and focus on her personal growth. This job gave her the opportunity to be creative, to challenge herself every day, and she learned to embrace each challenge, each failure, as part of her journey. On the evenings after work, Lily would meet David under the familiar streetlight. She would tell him about her new job, about the days she had slowly regained her confidence. David would just smile, saying nothing. But in his eyes, Lily saw satisfaction, as if he already knew she would find her way. "So you found your path, haven't you?" David asked, his voice gentle. "Yes," Lily replied, feeling the freedom in her heart. "Thank you, David. Thank you for helping me see what I had forgotten long ago." David nodded, a smile gently forming on his lips. Without many words, he knew that music wasn't just the healing of the soul. It was the strength that helped people rediscover themselves. A year later, Lily stood on stage with a charity music group playing a piece she had practiced diligently. The people around her didn't just hear music. They felt the change in her. She was no longer the girl who once felt lost, unsure of where to go. She had rediscovered the joy of living in the simplest things. And music, through the lessons David had taught her, had helped her become stronger, more creative, and more confident. She looked down at the stage where David stood, his eyes glowing, looking at her with pride. Lily smiled, and though no words were spoken, she knew that he had always been her companion throughout this journey. The event in Lily's life wasn't an end, but a new beginning. It had helped her rediscover her inner strength, find freedom in life, and create new opportunities for herself. And in each of those moments, music had been the torch, not only soothing the pain, but also guiding her through every challenge, helping her find joy in every step she took. A feeling of relief flooded Lily's heart as she left the stage after the charity performance. Everything seemed to have changed. The worries and insecurities had slowly faded, replaced by a newfound belief in herself. As she stepped off the stage, the looks from those around her, from the respectful gaze of the audience to the warm smile of David, all confirmed that she was no longer the girl who once thought she couldn't do anything. She had surpassed the limits she had once set for herself. She hadn't expected music to bring about such profound changes. Learning the violin from David, sharing silent moments, and understanding each other through music had taught her that patience and true friendship were the most important things. She had once thought she lived in the shadows, but now she understood that life always offers opportunities to start anew. Events were not endings, but ways to create a new life. That day, as she stood amidst the crowd, her hands gently lifting the violin and the first notes ringing out, she no longer felt anxious or afraid. What she felt at that moment was freedom. She could play music for herself, for the love of it, and not for the expectations of others. This made her realize that music had become an indispensable part of her life. A few months later, Lily's life returned to a normal rhythm, but with a different mindset. She found joy in her new job, not because it was easy, but because she had rediscovered her inner strength. She no longer drowned in worries about the future, about work, or about what she lacked. Lily had learned to face challenges and understood that instead of fearing them, each difficulty was an opportunity for her to grow. With her new job, she also began participating in a community music development project locally. Everything seemed to be opening up before her, but this time she wasn't in a rush. She knew she had the strength to accept life and do what she loved. Every evening, Lily would meet David. Under the streetlight beside the old violin, they continued to play, continuing to share melodies without needing to say too much. Those meetings had become a habit, not just about learning the violin, but also a time for her to feel peace in life. One night, as Lily sat beside David, a very special feeling began to rise in her heart. She realized that these meetings not only helped her improve her violin playing, but also helped her learn to live a more meaningful life. The challenges in life no longer scared her. They were part of the journey to find herself. And it was this friendship that had helped her realize that life doesn't always unfold the way we expect. But those changes can create a new path, a path leading to freedom and joy. David, Lily began, her voice softening. I've been thinking a lot about what you said before, about how music isn't just to learn, but to find oneself. Now I understand that music not only helps me heal the pain, but also helps me experience life in a different way. David didn't say anything, just nodded gently. He had seen the change in Lily for a long time, and now, as he looked at her sitting beside him, she was no longer just a girl learning to play the violin, but a woman who had found herself in this life. I don't feel like I'm alone anymore, Lily continued. I feel like I can share everything with those around me. And I've learned that everyone can create a new life from their brokenness and sorrow. David smiled softly, the streetlight casting light on his face. That's the most important thing, Lily. Healing doesn't come from avoiding, but from accepting and facing oneself. And you've done that. One autumn morning, as the soft golden sunlight filtered through the trees, Lily sat at a small cafe sipping a warm cup of tea. It was a day when she felt truly free, not only physically, but also in her soul. She no longer felt the need to race with life or perfection. She had learned to live authentically with her emotions, to face her pain, and most importantly, she had learned to love herself. Lily's steps were lighter now. Though life was still full of challenges, she no longer feared. She knew that every difficulty was just part of the journey, and music, friendship, and acceptance would always be her greatest companions on that path. A month later, Lily decided to organize a small concert for the community. It was the first time she confidently stood on stage, not just to play music, but to share her journey with others. The concert wasn't just about the music. It was about her story, the sorrows she had overcome, and how she had found joy in life. When the stage lights came on, Lily stood there holding her violin. She felt at peace. The notes she played weren't just melodies. They were all the emotions she had experienced. The sadness, the loneliness, and finally the joy when she learned to love herself. Each piece of music was a part of her, a thank you to everything she had been through and learned. When the performance ended, the applause rang out, but Lily wasn't seeking praise. She knew that the most important thing she had achieved was the freedom in her soul and the joy of living that she had found in the simplest things. She was no longer the person she once thought she would become. She had stepped out of the shadows of herself and into a life full of light. Under the dim streetlight, where everything seemed to settle, Lily sat beside David, her violin in hand. She felt a sense of completeness, as if everything around her was in harmony. There was no need to chase anything, no need to prove anything. She just needed to live and feel. That was the journey she had gone through, and music was the bridge that helped her find herself. This winter came earlier than usual. The biting cold winds made everyone hurry home. But beneath the dim streetlight, an unchanged scene unfolded. David was still sitting there, his violin in hand, playing melodies that only he and Lily could truly understand. This time, there were no worries, no heavy emotions weighing down Lily's heart. She was no longer the fragile girl avoiding her feelings. She had changed not just from the lessons David had taught her, but also from the challenging journey she had gone through. Lily walked up, sat beside him, as she always did. She didn't say anything, simply sitting and listening. This time, the sound of the violin wasn't just music. It was a flow of emotions, a connection between two hearts, a harmony they had found after months of sharing and learning. Every night under that streetlight, they didn't need to say much. Just the music, just their presence together was enough. David turned to look at Lily, his eyes warm. A slight smile appeared on his lips, not out of triumph or self-satisfaction, but out of contentment, seeing that she had found herself. "You've come further than I ever imagined," David said, his voice full of pride, but with a hint of nostalgia. "I knew you could do it, Lily. Music isn't just a tool. It's a part of you. It's how you face life." Lily looked into his eyes, feeling the friendship and patience he had shown her all this time. She couldn't express all the emotions in her heart, but simply sitting beside him, she felt a strange peace. David wasn't just a teacher. He was a true friend, the one who had helped her recognize her own worth. "Thank you, David." Lily said, her voice choked. She didn't need to say more because they both understood. "Thank you for helping me find my self-belief." David didn't reply, only continued playing. The music was gentle, like the waves soothing her heart. The melodies weren't just sounds. They were a transmission of the lessons he had taught her. Sometimes silence was the most beautiful music, and tonight they basked in that moment. A few weeks later, on a winter morning, Lily received an invitation to perform at a large concert where she would play in front of an audience for the first time. Her heart no longer raced with fear as it once had. She was ready not only because she had the skills, but because she knew that this was a way for her to share what she had learned, what she had overcome. The evenings with David, the music lessons, and the meaningful conversations had made her stronger. Lily no longer thought about what others would think of her. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone. All she needed to do was live true to herself, and that was her greatest victory. As she stepped onto the stage, the lights shone on her, and Lily felt no longer alone. Each note she played wasn't just music, it was a part of her heart. It was her story of sorrowful days, of joy, of friendship, and of healing. The people in the audience didn't just hear music. They felt the sincerity in each note. When the music ended, applause filled the air. Lily bowed her head, feeling a deep joy in her heart. It wasn't because of the applause, but because she had accomplished something she had once never imagined. She had overcome herself. After the performance, Lily returned to the familiar street where the streetlights still shone. David was still sitting there, his violin in hand, as if he had been waiting for her. She walked up, sat down beside him, and said nothing. But this time words weren't necessary. They understood each other without speaking. "Thank you once again," Lily said, her voice gentle but sincere. "Thank you for always being there for me, for helping me find my way." David didn't respond immediately, but his gaze was soft, as if he knew that no matter how much things changed, their friendship would never fade. Under the streetlight, with the violin in his hands, he knew they would always have each other, whether in moments of silence, in music, or in the challenges of life. The next spring, Lily continued on her path, but this time she no longer felt like she had to race against time or meet other people's expectations. She had found joy in music and in authentic relationships. And under that streetlight, where her friendship with David began, the music continued to play, not just for the beautiful melodies, but because this friendship would forever exist. Under the bright stars that night, Lily looked into David's eyes, and she knew that their friendship would last forever, like a song that would never end.